Welcome to the Take Sports Podcast, everybody. I'm Ryan Thomas. Thank you for joining me. I'm getting this show off to a interesting start as of 1:11 p.m., where it was supposed to be around 2 o'clock, but I'm getting started with today's show a little bit early. So thank you all for joining me. Thank you very much. I have a lot to cover as of today. I'm very excited to get off to today's show. I got a ton of Thomas Take mailbag questions to get to. And first off, I wanted to start off by saying thank you all for supporting this show as much as you guys can. I really appreciate it. It's been a fun ride thus far, communicating with you guys, with all the sports fans out there that agree or disagree with my opinion. I really appreciate the feedback that I get every day from you guys. So thank you very much for tuning into the show. And today's show, to start off, I asked you, the listeners, to submit your fan questions to the Thomas Take mailbag, and I got quite a few that I wanted to get started off with. I want to thank those on the MMA Freaks group on Facebook and Brandon Reed. You guys submitted the majority of the questions, and basically those were the questions that I chose out of the questions that I received on Facebook and Twitter. So let me get started off with those questions, and let's get it started. So, let's see here. First off, Aaron Murrow asked me, why isn't the UFC actively looking for female featherweights? No Ultimate Fighter, no sign of them pulling from other promotions besides possibly Megan Anderson. Where the hell is Jermaine? If Anderson fights Cyborg and wins, will this all of a sudden open up the division? As far as the female featherweight division, I think the UFC is going to be making additions to that division as time goes on within this year. Just right now, that Jermaine Durandamy Holly Holm fight kind of put a stall on things, being that the fight went the way that it did, where there was no clear-cut winner. Jermaine Durandamy does not want to fight Cyborg Santos, and she does not want to fight Holly Holm again. Holly Holm has already slotted in another fight with Betch Correia at 135. She's going back down to bantamweight in a fight that I easily think that she can win. So, Jermaine Durandamy is kind of falling off the face of the earth. And I've heard rumors of her retirement. If she retires, the UFC has to put the vacant title on the line, vacate the title, put it on the line again, and put it on the line with Cristiano Cyborg Santos versus Megan Anderson or versus Holly Holm. I mean, Cyborg versus Holly Holm would be a fantastic fight for the UFC, but right now Holly Holm has already slotted in with another competitor in Betch Correia at 135, which I highly anticipate her winning that fight. So that would definitely be the case. Marcus Banuelos asked me, should Robert Whittaker fight winner of GSP and Bisping, or fight Yoel Romero, Luke Rockhold for number one contender spot? Bisping and GSP probably isn't going to happen until October or November, so I would assume that Whittaker will take on Luke Rockhold. That's my answer to that question for the number one contender spot. Brady Greer asked me, why is the middleweight division being held up if Bisping and GSP ain't fighting till late this year? Bisping should fight Romero. Bisping is not going to fight Romero. He actually has had problems in training camp with his knee, and that is why he had to have the surgery necessary on his knee. And I think that will prohibit him from fighting GSP or fighting in general this summer. I think that GSP fight with Michael Bisping will happen in October or November. Michael Bisping said on his Believe You Me podcast that he is not going to take on GSP or any other. He's not going to take on any summer competitors, being that he has had the knee injury. Ryan Fortune asked me, what do you think about Woodley? Do you think he brings all the hate to himself, or people are too harsh on him? I think he brings the hate to himself. I think his fighting style is something that kind of puts the hate on him as well. That last performance versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson was not a competitive one by any stretch of the imagination. I thought he actually lost that fight. So I think he kind of brings the criticism on himself when he talks this big game and then he puts out a performance like that versus Wonderboy. Arguably, I thought he lost that fight. So I would have to say that, yes, he brings it on himself. Email Thitterup asked me, who will Woodley fight next? Emil, I think that Woodley will fight the winner of Masvidal versus Maia. I think that's the best case scenario. Ryan Fortune asks, who is the GOAT? Jones, GSP, Silva, and Mighty Mouse. My opinion's well known on that. I think the greatest of all time is easily George St. Pierre. I think that he's the type of guy that I would definitely have to say is the greatest of all time. I mean, he defended his belt over a 7-year span versus the best fighters in the world, fought number one contender versus number one contender in his era. Every fight within the championship reign, he was the champion, lost his belt to Matt Serra in an epic upset, but he got back on the horse, destroyed Matt Serra in the rematch, and then just had this complete run of beating these top contenders, Thiago Alves, Carlos Condit, Nick Diaz, Johnny Hendricks, Jake Shields. He just went through everybody. And I think that, to me, says that he is the greatest of all time by far. More questions I got here. Thank you guys for submitting these as well. Winner of McGregor versus Diaz 3. I think if that fight happens at 155, it's definitely an interesting one. This is probably my toughest question to date, MMA-wise, that I received. I would have to go with Conor just because he's the champion. And if the fight goes the distance, I think they would give it to him once again. So, and then I want to go to the fights, or not the fights, the questions, the questions that a good friend of mine wrote to me, Brandon Reed from MyFantasySportsTalk.com. Brandon Reed did a fantastic job of hosting the My Fantasy Sports Talk live draft show. He did amazing. If you guys haven't checked that out, volleying our opinions back and forth like a volleyball match. He was kind of the mediator for all of it, and it was very, very well done by him. I was really impressed with the way he handled himself during that show. Could have been really easy for things to unravel with so many people on at once, but it was pretty clean. So Brandon Reed, the newest subscriber to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast channel, which you all should do, is subscribe to that Thomas Take YouTube channel. Podcast questions, he said, I used to love boxing. Last night's fight does not offer me hope. I know you're a big MMA guy, but boxing is officially dead and buried. I've been saying it for years. Boxing did this to itself. They've made the sport so money-oriented that they stall the fights that people want to see, so that way that fight can make more money when it finally happens. It's just a greedy form of business, and it actually takes a lot away from the sport. In the case of Mayweather versus Pacquiao, that fight should have happened in 2008, 2009. It didn't happen until 2015. So that being the case, we didn't get to see that fight with Floyd Mayweather in his prime and Manny Pacquiao in his prime. We got to see that fight with Floyd Mayweather at the end of his prime and Manny Pacquiao out of his prime. So there's a huge difference. And last night's fight, where Canelo was completely outmatching Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., didn't really offer people a lot of hope. The only thing that did was the end of the fight, which they said that Gennady Golovkin will fight Canelo Alvarez September 16th. I may believe it when I see it type guy, and I'll believe it when I see it. I don't think that this fight will happen until both of them are in the ring. I can't take boxing's word for anything. I mean, that's in large part the reason why I hate this Floyd Mayweather-Conor McGregor talk, is because believe it when we see it, show us. History says that these fights never happen. So, very interesting to say the least. He also asked me, Brandon Reed asked me, don't you think Zeke Elliott is the safest pick at number 1 in this year's fantasy draft? And I'm going to kind of save that for the next one. And the rest of the questions I'm actually going to save for the next one. So we'll get to those later. I'm going to get to that in part 2 of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast today. Bobby Wilkinson commented on a post of mine. And he's asking me, how do you listen? Everybody, listen on YouTube. And I also reposted on the Facebook page, the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. All those questions were great. I really appreciate the questions that you guys asked me. I think that there's real validity to the fact that boxing is not what it once was, obviously. The days of like Oscar De La Hoya even, and Bernard Hopkins. Bernard Hopkins has competed as recently as this year. But even that guard is completely gone. Heavyweights, there is some life in the heavyweight division with Anthony Joshua with his knockout victory over Vladimir Klitschko. That was an amazing fight from everything I've watched on it. The bits and pieces, I didn't watch it in its entirety, but a very, very captivating fight, to say the least, where it was an actual fight. So, I'm very curious to see how that pans out. What do they do with Vladimir Klitschko now? What do they do with Anthony Joshua now? Does he sign himself up for a fight with Deontay Wilder? That's a huge heavyweight title fight. If that fight happens, that's a big title fight featuring two guys that are complete heavyweight competitors and in this boxing world now. So that's good for boxing. Boxing's been dying for a top of the line heavyweight for quite some time, and they finally got one. And Klitschko looked slow, looked stiff. It was clear that Anthony Joshua was the younger, more fluid competitor out of the two. So very interesting to see what happens with boxing there. And then obviously you got September 16th. Supposedly Canelo Alvarez will fight Gennady Golovkin. I will believe it when I see it, but only time will tell. I really think that Gennady Golovkin is a top-of-the-line competitor, and I think so is Canelo Alvarez. You're talking about the two best fighters in boxing right now. It's the biggest super fight since Mayweather-Pacquiao. So there was a fight that was talked about when Mayweather-Pacquiao was being talked about in 2015 when it was finally signed, sealed, and delivered, and that Mayweather-Pacquiao fight, I was so excited for that, and it still has kind of left a sour taste in my mouth when it comes to boxing. You see what Manny Pacquiao has done since that Mayweather fight. He looks like a completely different fighter for the better. I really don't think Manny was 100% for that fight, and I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but he was not 100%. When you see the way he fought his most recent fight, and I can't remember who it was against, he looked like a complete speed demon, and that's how Manny Pacquiao looked in his earlier days. So, the collarbone injury, I don't know how much of a factor that played into the Mayweather fight, but I would say it did play a significant factor in Manny Pacquiao's offensive ability. And then, Floyd Mayweather after that fight, he takes on Andre Berto, who had lost 3 of his last 4 fights, and that's his last fight. That's the fight that puts him at 49-0. It just, that fight shouldn't have even happened. Fact that he would even take that fight for his 49th bout, a bout that would tie him with Rocky Marciano, that was really just a joke. And I, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but Andre Berto hasn't been Andre Berto in over 10 years. So why would they put him in there with Andre Berto? I don't understand that at all. Boxing is not what it once was. MMA is at a point where it's at its highest point, but there is more money in boxing than there is MMA, and there always will be, because boxing has, over 100 years of an advantage against MMA, so to speak. I mean, boxing fights have been paid to attend for, almost 100 years now, where MMA is, the UFC especially, is only, 25 years old. So, it's as old as I am, and the sport of boxing dates back generations to generation to generation. So boxing is ahead money-wise, and they will be for the foreseeable future. Thank you guys so much for submitting your Thomas Take mailbag questions to me. I'm going to answer more of Brandon Reed's questions in the next episode of the Thomas Take, coming right up after the commercial break.